that's not a comic book. Now that's a comic book.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Comic Reviews. Hope all is well. Hope everyone's having a good time. I just want to make sure things are working on my end. Hope there was some advance notice on this. Not entirely sure about that. As you can see, behind me is getting more and more barren. I am working on this move. It's getting pretty empty in here. I'm afraid to start doing episodes and just having echoes going down. But yeah, so got some Lego stuff left over that I'm afraid to move. Comic boxes, light. Whole apartment's getting pretty empty as of late. Just kind of boxes and everything. It's getting kind of nuts. So again, I apologize if things get kind of out of order or whatever this next few weeks as we get more into the moving process. I don't know what you call it. Anyway, yeah, all that. Anyway, later start tonight because of the whole moving thing, but that's okay because it's a light week. If it were a heavier week, I might have had to push it back, but we got a pretty light week. This week we'll be talking about Batwoman, number 18, Doctor Strange, number 4, Batman, number 53, and for Trade Talk, we'll talk about X-Men, God Loves, Man Kills. So yeah, just a handful of books this week. Nice light week, which honestly I need sometimes. Alrighty, let's just go ahead and get into it and talk about Batwoman, number 18. Final issue of Margaret Bennett's Batwoman run. And it feels like the final issue. It really does wrap up not only what was happening in this very short story arc, but really it wraps up what Rebirth Batwoman's character arc has been. Or let me rephrase that. It wraps up the statement, the thesis of the character in this Rebirth run. Batwoman number 1, Margaret Bennett came out and she had, and I'll give Tinian a little credit because some of the stuff that was going on in that issue was related to Tinian and what he was wanting to do. But Batwoman number 1 comes out with a very strong diagnosis of Batwoman, of who Kate Kane is. And this goes through that journey, and it looks at the whole story arc, this 3-volume arc of who Kate Kane is and what she becomes and what kind of person she is. And the thesis of her in Batwoman number 1 was that she is an addict. That she is the kind of person who trades one addiction for the other until something finally comes around and sobers her up. And that sobering factor was Batman, was the mantle of the Bat. And that's how she kind of got her life on track. And so she's, in this issue, she's heavily reflective of what her life had been like, and what she'd spent her life doing. And it's really interesting the way that Margaret Bennett, it's just the basics of writing, but she does it so well. Margaret Bennett connects the events of the story to the internal character and connects the arc through metaphor. It's perfect. She's talking to Clock King here while beating up robots because it's comic books, and she's talking about what this drug that Clock King's been selling does. What does Cryos show them when they take it? Does it clear their minds to troubleshoot their heists so they think they've become some damn psychics? Do they become addicts spending their time dreaming the luscious daydreams, forgetting to live, stuck wondering if they'll ever come true? Take it from someone who lost years of her life to a memory from the past. Losing years of your life to a daydream of the future ain't much better. That's really, really good. And it keeps going and going, and we just get some really fantastic moments throughout this story wherein she gets dosed with this drug as Clock King's trying to attack her and Renee Montoya, and you just begin to, see the effects of the drug on Kate Kane's life, on how it makes you see it makes you see different points in your life and different kind of possibilities and timelines. Let's see here. Not this, no more of this. Drugs and dreams and addictions, all our triumphs, all our failures, all that time. Renee is right. It wasn't wasted. I spent a year on a quest, rescued an island, paid a debt, destroyed a terrorist cult, saved my sister's life. Time is a tool and time is a weapon. That's what Cryos is supposed to show us. The moment of opportunity. The moment when you can act and achieve something great. The moment when you can act and cause something terrible. The moment you can let pass by and never know what could have been. If it made me better, if it changed me, if it was something that had to be done, it wasn't wasted. There is no one true path. I tell you that from the bottom of my heart. No one true love, but many loves, many hands that make and change you. And if we lived our lives unchanged, what would be the point of time? If it made you wiser, made you happy, if it was time and yours and it all happened at all, no, it wasn't wasted. God, that is such a fantastic diagnosis of this run. And it's so well seated because there's that line in there, many hands that make and change you. When the first arc of this series was called The Many Arms of Death, which, if you have arms, guess what you have. So it's so well tied and wrapped in, and we get this moment at the end that I really, really like. I will stop one point. They're arresting, I think it's Clock King, or they're arresting someone, and the guy's like just ranting. It was bonkers, Detective Bullet. Drug-dealing robots, super psychic time travel, masquerade mayhem, also maybe lesbians? Oh, I love this. It's great. Anyway, I really like this moment right here at the end, or toward the end, where Renee Montoya is being walked home by Kate Kane, and they, of course, have a relationship in their past that didn't work out. And Renee says to her, speaking of long lost, we could try this, Try again. No, what am I saying? Not again. No more again. Time is a flat circle nonsense. Kate Kane, what would you say to a first date? So it looks like Margaret Bennett's going to reestablish the, or setting the groundwork here to reestablish the relationship between Kate Kane and Renee Montoya, which is really great stuff. I don't particularly have like a vested ship, I guess, with Kate Kane. Whoever she's dating, I'm fine with. I know Maggie Sore is usually her boo. Anyway, so that's all really good. I really like a lot of that stuff. We get some fantastic splash pages of Batwoman just reflecting on her life, on really what this run has been, what it means. I love this sequence right here where her and Renee Montoya hold hands. It's beautiful stuff. This just really, really well done. And again, just fantastic splash pages that kind of go through the character's history here. And it makes me want to not only reread the run, but also go back and read the Greg Rucka run, which I just never did. And of course, the very short conclusion arc is called Time of Your Life. So that's really, really great. And again, Margaret Bennett does speeches so well. You have had a hand in good works and evil, but you have and will come home. And so every day, in defiance and gratitude, I ask this: in the time of your life, do not forget to live. Ah, love it. There's so much still to be done. There's so much still to look forward to. God, Marguerite Bennett's such a good writer. I just absolutely adore her stuff. So yeah, this is an absolutely fantastic conclusion to the series. You know, there definitely is some continuity stuff with Batwoman, the Rebirth run. I'll say that. There's some stuff that definitely ties into what's going on in Detective. I'm not reading Detective. It didn't bother me that much. They explained enough about what I needed to know in the book that the moment still worked. And there's obviously continuity stuff with her past, but just generally you need to know who Kate Kane is. I feel like just skimming the Wikipedia article on Kate Kane, if you're wondering about this series, if you heard the CW Batwoman announcement news and you want to read some Batwoman, Marguerite Bennett's run is a really good place to start. Start with Volume 1, The Many Arms of Death. Let's see. I saw there was a live conversation going on here. Lo dropped by just to say hi. Hello, Lo. I'm not sure if you're still here, but glad to have you, even if you don't read. Mano says, I like Batwoman, and I've picked up a couple of issues here and there. I'm thinking of collecting it monthly. Well, that won't really work for you unless you mean trade. I do recommend the trade. I think it's going to be 3 to 4 volumes of trade, if that makes... Yeah, I think the math works out on that. 18 issues, so... Thoughts on Ruby Rose casting a CW Batwoman in the backlash from some fans that she's not lesbian enough due to her identifying gender fluid, also that she's not Jewish. I don't understand. She's not lesbian enough. Whatever. It's... I don't know. I don't know what to... I don't know what to make of shit like that. It's whatever. I don't know anything about Ruby Rose as an actress. To my knowledge, I've not seen her in anything, and I don't have a ton of faith in the CW. I'll say I've liked what they've done casting-wise. I've never had a problem with their casting. I'm more worried about the writing of the series and how that's going to turn out. Let's see here. Also, Ian, did you know that Marguerite Bennett wrote one of the 2 short stories in this week's Batgirl 25 oversized issue? No, I did not. And damn it, now I wish I picked that up. Anyway, Batwoman might be a nice series to pick up if you want a Bat book without the Bat baggage. That's a good point. Robert Emmett says, I really got to grab this in trade. I like what I read in singles, but it seemed a bit too slow. I guess I'm just a bit used to Bennett in chunks instead of bits, like I've just mainly read her in trade. That's fair. I think it's a great run. I think it's going to read even better in trade than it does in single because of how interconnected all of it really is. So, you know, do what you gotta do. All right. Let's go ahead and move on and talk about Doctor Strange #4. Man, I really enjoy this series. It's super interesting, and it's getting really into just who Stephen Strange is as a character, as a really arrogant jerk that gets himself in a lot of trouble. So that's really fun for me. He goes to save this dwarf weaponer, who's, you know, one of the weaponers from Asgard, from these people that kidnapped him, and it's just a whole thing. And he's been trying to get his magic back, and it's not really working as well as he'd hoped. He's getting kind of shown up left and right. And then just luckily, in a moment of desperation, he's able to resummon the Cloak of Levitation, but because of Mark Waid's diagnosis of Stephen Strange as just being too arrogant, he can't help but try to use the Cloak of Levitation to go back and kick some ass of the guys that just kind of beat the shit out of him. And that ends up getting his companion captured, and he and the dwarf are teleported away. And the dwarf doesn't really like him very much, and has this whole diagnosis of him. Look, you're broken. You're furious that someone or something knocked you down, stole your toys. It practically radiates off you. I wanted justice done. Well, there's your problem. Justice, young man, is all well and good, but it isn't a founding principle of magic, and you know it. Neither is temper, neither is self-pity. You're not yourself. How dare you talk to me like this? Spoken like an arrogant man who just realized exactly how angry he is, and who had damn well better get over it if he wants to be skilled enough to save his friend. Anyway, so I like that, and then I like this little thing that that Waid does. It's pretty good. Like, okay, if we're gonna go save my friend, we need tools. All I have on me are these: the wand of Thessal, the heart of Sambath. Where's your stuff? This is my. No, of Shambhala, of. I'm sure those are impressive items, but they're taken from others. Don't you build your own tools? If not, why not? The answer to the question was shockingly simple, because it had simply never occurred to him. I'm no magician, but I'm a weaponsmith, and lucky for us, a damn fine teacher. I can get us to Cana, but I can't take us someplace. I can't get us to Cana, but I can take us someplace useful. Welcome to your new workshop, Stephen Strange. Welcome to the Forge. So Doctor Strange is now going to make his own magical items that are specifically created by him for him. Which, again, Wade's really getting into a thing in fantasy, magical fantasy stuff, that you just don't think about. Like, you always hear about, like, the mystical artifact that's super powerful or whatever. You always hear about that, but yeah, just inherently, it had to be created. We always hear about, like, the evil wizard. Like, all right, let's use Harry Potter as an example. Yeah, Voldemort creates the Horcruxes and all that. And yeah, cool, fine, but we don't see him do it. It's just the conceit of the story. The story of making those things is inherently interesting and necessary. So, like, yeah, I'm just really trying to scratch my head and think about stuff I've read where we see the magicians or magic users or whatever create objects as opposed to obtain objects. This is so up my alley on just a, like, really interesting deconstruction of tropes within fantasy storytelling in particular, but sci-fi storytelling as a lens. It, you know, like in sci-fi, that's a pretty normal thing where we see someone create a weapon or whatever to use, but we don't usually see that in fantasy. So it's using a lot of storytelling elements from sci-fi to bring them over to magical fantasy. And just kind of make it work and streamline it. And it's space wizards, and I love it. Also, it turns out the guys that kidnap Cana are trying to attack Earth. So, yeah, I don't know. I like that. Robert Evans says, why am I not reading this? This snarky-ass dialogue is just my kind of shit. It's good, man. Mark Waid is a really fun writer, if nothing else. I created the emblem of Emmett. It's a pastor cast on my hand from age 6 that had the power to break teeth when thrown. Good job. Mano says, I might check this out in trade. I do enjoy Wade's work most of the time. It's pretty good. It's not like, you know, knock your socks off amazing or anything like that, but it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's an interesting take on the character, it's just a fun idea. That's why I picked it up, is I heard Space Wizards. I'm like, yeah, of course. If you have magic in the Marvel Universe and you have aliens in the Marvel Universe, why wouldn't you have alien wizards? And so it's like, oh, I'm so into that. It's It's really working for me. I'm quite enjoying this. All right. Last single issue of the week is Batman, number 53. The conclusion to the Cold Days story arc. So, did Mr. Freeze really kill those women? Still doesn't matter. Still does not matter. And that's the best part. But yeah, this is Bruce Wayne working his best to just try to prove something to this final juror in the room. Oh god, that's going to be a word. This final juror in the room. And the way he's able to prove that Batman is fallible is through the fact that she's religious. And he basically deconstructs the idea of Batman and establishes that he's clearly human and that we treat him like a god, but we know he's not, and we need to remind ourselves of that. And so we're not here to put God on trial, we're here to put a man's actions on trial, a man who is fallible and can be mistaken. And I really, really like that. And then the big line in here that I really, really worked, that really, really worked for me, was about Job, the book of Job from the Bible. You ever read the book of Job? That's what God said to him, right? God tore this guy's life away, burned his farm and his children, and Job gets a little angry and asks God, why? And God just says, I created the mountains and the miracles, and you're questioning me? You? Who are you? I really like that. And of course it's all connected to what Bruce just went through with Selina. It's all connected back to that. It's like he expects so much and it just doesn't work out for him. I was hurt recently. I had for years put every bit of myself into this Batman because he was good enough to protect me from all the pain, all my mother, my father, this life, this city, the fear of everything just breaking. And it worked, and I worked. I was working. After so many years, I had something I never thought I'd have. I was happy. And then it all fell. Everything falls, and I fell. I screamed as loud as I could, and my scream was a prayer to him, to the mask, and the symbol, and the rope, and the fist. I begged for him to catch me. Tears in my eyes, I fell, and I begged, and I waited. Please, please, please. Batman, help me. And I'm still waiting. If I can't see the truth, I'll always be waiting. He's not God. He's not. He tries. He does, I know. And he fails, and he tries again. But he can't. He does not provide solace from pain. He cannot give you hope for the eternal. He cannot comfort you for the love you lost. God blesses your soul with grace. Batman punches people in the face. And it's that moment that convinces this final member of the jury that Batman cannot be trusted without question. That he is fallible too. And that is what allows the jury to vote not guilty in the case of Mr. Freeze. I really, really like this arc. It's a nice, short 3-issue arc, and it gets so much done. It's a great social commentary piece. It's a great character piece for Bruce Wayne. It's just a really good story, damn it. I really like it. It advances the run in a very literally character-focused way. There's all these flashes to, Batman in the streets and showing you, what he's talking about. Like this image of Catwoman so far away and from the view. There's all these artistic parallels that are meant to show you that. Oh, that's odd. All these artistic parallels meant to show you these things and give you a sense of what Bruce is talking about connected to himself beyond what he's just talking about connected to the case. And it's so unnecessary. Like, it's great. Don't get me wrong. Lee Week's art is amazing, and it's a smart paralleling kind of move, but you honestly don't need it. So much is done on the dialogue here with such little dialogue. I love that so much about Tom King's run. I see people complain all the time about Tom King's dialogue being so simple and stupid, and yet people praise it. And I just, minimalism's lost on people, I guess. I don't really know what else to say. I hate to be so snobbish about it, but it's lost on you, you damn jackals. There's so much done with the pacing and the structure of the damn word balloons and the way the sentences work. There's so much emotional weight. I was hurt recently. It's like fucking poetry the way it's written. It's perfect. It is perfectly chosen words. There's so much thought put into the language that is being said. I can read you a million books where people just fucking talk. And there's no thought put into the words. It's just, this is what the character's saying, and that's what the character's saying. That's all it is. This has so much weight and thought put in behind it. There's so many levels to that line about what Bruce is talking about. I was hurt recently. Number one, there's what he is saying to the jury about how he feels about Batman and what his own life experience has been. So there's that level of communication to them. Two, what he's saying to us. This line, I was hurt recently, is just as much about the Catwoman stuff as it is about what he's trying to tell the jury. There's just, it's so good. I love it. So damn good. Really, if you don't love Tom King's Batman run by this point, I don't know what to tell you. I really don't. You don't have good taste in comics, I'm afraid. I cannot hear an argument for why it doesn't work. I just don't comprehend why someone would not like Tom King's Batman at this point. It doesn't click for me. Alright, what's going on in the comments? It's that thing that ruined my day. I honestly cried during Bruce's monologue. The discussion of faith really got me. Honestly, my favorite of the short arcs in this run so far. Wasn't sure until this last issue, but goddamn, it's so fucking tragic. Batman is always right, then why bother with trials for his villains? The very idea that Bats is perfect denies the right to a fair trial because it destroys the presumption of innocence. Yep. It's really interesting the way they get into that. Zorro Fan Productions. Hi, Zorro Fan Productions. Nice to see you. Zorro Fan Productions always leaves comments on Geeky Gentleman episodes. And I love them because they're always the same comment. It's just cool. I'm like, yes. I got the cool stamp of approval from Zorro Fan Productions. Always appreciate that. Alrighty. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it for the new part of comic reviews. We are done with the weekly issues. It was a short week, which I needed because otherwise I probably wouldn't have been able to do this. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to Trade Talk. So I say goodbye to the live audience and I go on to Trade Talk. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Trade Talk. I'm Super2 and we're back with some more X-Men stuff with a very famous X-Men story, God Loves, Man Kills, written by Chris Claremont with art by Brad Anderson. Now, even if you've never, or Brent Anderson's the artist. Now, if you've never read this before, I guarantee you've seen stuff from it because we have this very famous panel of Mike Pence pointing at Nightcrawler and saying, "Human, you dare call that thing human?" And that panel really does set the tone for what this entire story is about. But if that wasn't enough for you, I gotta tell you, this opening is hard to read. This opening is scary. We begin with two children running in the night away from someone until one of the children is shot and he falls down, and then some people come up, shoot the other one, and decide, let's hang him from a swing set. And from that swing set, they have a sign that says "Mutie" attached to them. So this is the X-Men story. This is the story that's like, okay, there is definitely a parallel between the X-Men and oppressed minority groups. That exists. This is the story that's all about that. This is the story where it's like, okay, let's do it. Let's comic bookify it. Let's take that 100% literally and blow it out of proportion to an absurd degree to really, really just look at it and throw it out in the open. And it's pretty fascinating how it's done. So the X-Men in here deal with Stryker. The Stryker building, headquarters of the worldwide evangelical Stryker crusade. Reverend Stryker is the bad guy of this story. And he has got a crusade to, you know, convince people that mutants aren't people. And, you know, he's the guy from the Human, you dare call that thing human. That's Mike Pence. It's Mike Pence is Stryker. So yeah, he's got not only a public crusade, but he is working in private to try to eradicate mutants, working against the X-Men in private. And really, a lot of this gets very deep into these social issues, wherein Kitty Pryde is in a fight with a guy who has anti-mutant sentiments. Kind of gets in a scuffle with him. And one of her ballet instructors says, "With their training, you could have crippled Danny or worse. He'd have done the same to me, I bet. Come on, let's get you inside and cleaned up. How can you all be so calm? Didn't you hear what he said?" "They're only words, child. Suppose he'd called me a nigger lover, Stevie. Would you be so damn tolerant then?" And she says that to a black woman, which, I mean, that's a... I don't know if you could get away with that today. I've got to at some point do a whole video on the N-bomb, because I find there's a really interesting discussion to have there, but the use of it here I feel is very, very effective. Generally speaking, my opinion is when you're talking about the word or when you're quoting something, you're generally fine. I don't like talking around the word that much because it just feels so abstract at that point and you lose some of the power of it. when you're quoting something, depends on what you're quoting, depends on the context. But when the word's important to the sentence or whatever you're quoting, yeah, I generally say it's fine to use. And I could probably be convinced otherwise, but that's kind of been my default. So the use of it here to throw it at a black woman to confront her own type of oppression is really interesting. And I like the way that Claremont gets it, where Colossus apologizes. She did not mean... And we get the thought balloon for this lady. Of course she did, my friend. She meant every word. And she was right. The way in which bigotry is excused, like, it's just interesting. People will excuse it and try to play it off, and they just don't. Doesn't matter your racial background. I've seen all kinds of people try to play it off and try to excuse certain behaviors, and sometimes it takes a shocking moment like that to confront it. So I don't know, it's interesting. Again, white girl throwing the N-word in the direction of a black woman is maybe a little much, but I don't know. I think the moment plays pretty well, and it earns the right to do that, especially given how conscious of the issues this book is dealing with is. That's a pretty blatant tip of the hat to what this book's going to be talking about, and we're only 16 pages in, and like a lot of these pages aren't even story pages yet. So then it goes to the X-Men watching a televised debate between Stryker and Professor X. And there's a lot of discussion between Scott and Storm. This did not go well, did it, Scott? We were slaughtered, Aurora. Charles was speaking to people's ideals, Stryker to their fears. But on camera, Charles looked so grim and foreboding, almost scary, that he ended up making Stryker's case for him. Let's hope the damage isn't irreparable. So that was interesting. I don't know. I like that this pretty critical of appearing on television with the opposition. Because TV does a really stupid thing. At least TV news, and it's kind of... News in general, journalism in general has this problem. TV does it turns up the dial to 11 on the stupid. Because you can watch the news, and like climate change is the go-to, but I'll use something more ridiculous. You can watch the news, and you can find like an interview or whatever with two sides being represented. One can be a college professor of history on the Holocaust. Can be a tenured professor who's been working in his field for decades and has all kinds of knowledge, intimate, shocking knowledge about the Holocaust. And television will put him on the same platform and elevate the idea, the opposing idea, as if it is just as valid. Some fucking nutcase rando who just says the Holocaust never happened. It just has nothing to back it up. It's just a fucking nut job. They'll put him on stage with an expert, and it will present the ideas as if they're equal. Because journalism has a really stupid thing of every story has multiple sides to it, and you have to represent those sides. Yes, but to a point. To a point where it doesn't matter what someone thinks, they have to have factual evidence to back it up. They have to have credibility. And then TV journalism is just dials it up to 11 because they got to get ratings, and so they'll pick the most outrageous personalities to present that kind of shit to. And so like the Holocaust thing, it's a little disingenuous. That can happen, to my knowledge. I've not seen that broadcast, though I'm not entirely sure it doesn't exist. That's still a thing that happens. You'll find that with, like, climate change deniers all the time. They get put on, like, you'll get a climate scientist that knows what the fuck he's talking about. Some jackass climate denier. There's no fucking clue what's going on. So yeah, that's an interesting little take. And I'm not sure how aware Chris Claremont is of what he's talking about there. But again, this feels like he put on his big boy gloves. He really thought this script through. And this is not like some accident that this story is deciding so abruptly to take these issues on. This was intended to be the X-Men story. This was intended to be the story that kind of tried to encapsulate everything that made the X-Men and do it with the social issue at the forefront. So thinking about the public consciousness power of television does seem like a really conscious decision on Claremont's part, and so I quite like that. Then we get a scene in the Danger Room, which is pretty fun. Just to break it up, give it some action. It looks like the Professor, Scott, and Aurora are killed, and everyone's having a hard time with that. But then Logan's sure that they haven't been killed, but just to make it look like that, and gets into a whole thing. Fighting Stryker's devoted cultists, and yada, 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 yada. Kitty Pryde gets kidnapped. They do some interrogation. Magneto joins the X-Men because he wants to take down Stryker too. Then we cut to where Professor X is. And he is being brainwashed and psychologically tortured by being forced to live out horrendous torture at the hands of the X-Men as he's crucified by them. That's really interesting. That's super deep, and I don't know what to make of that. Does Charles see himself as a Jesus being crucified for his children? Or is that his greatest fear? Is that's what will happen with him? Or is it just because Stryker, as a villain here, is portrayed as a religious zealot, so when he crafts these nightmarish things for Charles to go through, he does so with religious imagery? Or is it all of the above? It's really interesting, really good stuff. Anyway, we go into Stryker's past a little bit. He had to deliver his son on the side of the road, saw it was a mutant, and immediately killed his newborn infant son and his wife. Which, that's super fucked. That's a hell of an origin. Kitty Pryde has to run around New York City for a bit, and that has a scene that bothers me, where she runs into a gang, a street gang. Well, it's pretty clearly all different ethnic groups, and they're super rapey. So I don't love that. That feels pretty stereotypical, and it kind of, I don't know if it discredits, but it certainly devalues some of the good faith that this built up. Everyone's got their blind spots. Everyone's got their things that they don't think about. They've just accepted. This probably would have been the time to really think that kind of stuff through and really consciously choose who you're going to have be gang members if you're going to put a scene like this in here. That feels pretty typical. And again, this isn't the thing of like, oh, well, black people aren't in gangs, is what you're trying to say. No, there are all kinds of different gangs with all kinds of different racial makeups in them. My thing is just more, every choice should be intentional. And so if you're going to have Kitty Pryde be confronted by a gang, then that gang should, the makeup of that gang should be intentional and should add to the story and not detract from it or confuse it in this way. So that's just one of those things. Ultimately, the X-Men are able to get together, get Kitty Pryde back, and form a plan to try to save Professor X. It's kind of crazy and involved, so I'm not going to get into it. Ultimately, Stryker's at a rally, hyping people up to say that mutants aren't people. And Magneto tries to come in and make a big show of it, but almost gets killed because Charles has been captured. The X-Men are able to free Charles through crazy Wolverine plan. And then they go confront Stryker on his own stage. And it's really interesting. Good evening, Reverend. But you're supposed to be dead? We're full of surprises, Stryker, as you'll soon see. You've been making some pretty extreme charges against us. We figured we'd claim equal time to answer them. You don't mind, do you? Your toys are broken, Reverend. Your goons are beaten. It's just your word against ours. Then I have nothing to fear. You're a lucky man. Thanks to you and people like you, mutants live in fear every day of our lives. And sometimes those lives are very short. Less than a week ago, 2 children in Connecticut were murdered, Stryker, condemned solely for an accident of birth. Would you do that to someone because of the color of their skin or their beliefs? I do nothing, Cyclops. I am the instrument of the Lord, and whatever a man's color or beliefs, he is still human. Those children and you, X-Men, are not. Says who? You? What makes your link with heaven any stronger than mine? We have unique gifts, but no more so and no more special than those granted a physician, or a physicist, or a philosopher, or athlete. It could be due to an accident of nature or divine providence. Who's to say? Are arbitrary labels more important than the way we live our lives? What we're supposed to be more important than what we actually are? For all you know, we could be the real human race, and the rest of you the mutants. Human? You dare call that thing human? More human than you. And then it leads to a big moment where Stryker tries to murder Kitty Pryde. Ultimately, a security guard at the event decides, nah, he's the real bad guy, and takes Stryker out. So, I don't know. There's definitely a lot of liberal chest thumping going on there. The idea of confronting Stryker with words as opposed to action is certainly more of a neoliberal kind of perception, but that's kind of the X-Men's thing, so I can't really harp on it too much, especially when it's followed up so directly by this scene where they talk with Magneto and try to convince him to stick with them, and Magneto says he cannot condone the actions of not fighting back, not ending this when they have the chances. And ultimately, it's not Xavier that argues against Magneto this time. It's Scott. Xavier's kind of with Magneto, kind of agrees with them, and says maybe we do need to change. After all, they just tried to make me a weapon against my own people. And Scott's the one that has to talk Charles back and tell Magneto, no, we are going to work for a better way that doesn't involve violence. So I don't know. It's a really, really interesting, really good story that does get to the heart of what the X-Men are, what the X-Men have been intended to be. And it's really, really touching and interesting in that way. Do I agree with the politics on show and here? not holy, but I like them. Certainly not holy, certainly not to the degree to which the story presents itself. You know, confront with words and then let the enemy show themselves as the bad guy. No, Stryker pulling out the gun there on Kitty Pryde that wraps him up and firmly labels him as the bad guy. That's a easy writer get out of jail free card. That would never happen. You couldn't confront Donald Trump on stage for all of his racism and bigotry and hope that he would pull a gun out and be show himself to be the monster that he is. He would much rather just bide his time, wait, and kill you, or hurt you behind your back. That's the problem with bigotry, is it's willing to be open, but it's never willing to put itself at risk in the open. It's calculated. It's smarter than people give it credit for. And so the idea, if you have the chance to confront it with words, it's a nice idea. But this story gets to have a magic wrap-up button that gets to absolve everybody and gets to make Cyclops' way work without it necessarily having to deal with the reality of having these kinds of people in power over you. So there's definitely a lot to unpack, a lot of interesting there, but that is the X-Men philosophy. That is Charles Xavier's idea of the quote-unquote better way. People make the Martin Luther King, Malcolm X comparison between Magneto and Xavier, and it's definitely there and sometimes over-exaggerated, but this is kind of the go-to case for it. Even though it's not Charles making the argument here. And that's kind of the ultimate view of it. The ultimate noble idea is just to put your life on the line non-violently in order to show your humanity, your compassion, your ability to be a human, not an animal, and to force the bigotry to expose itself as less than human. That's the ideal, and it certainly can work. But they're smarter than that most of the time. That'll do it. That'll do it for this episode of Trade Talk. Hope everyone enjoyed. Hope everyone had a good time. Thanks for watching. And that'll do it for this episode of Comic Reviews, I think. I saw Philip Kelton showed up. Zorro Fan Productions saying, hey, do you have a Zorro book review coming up? Nah, man, I don't have any more Zorro comics. I would love it if Dynamite would publish some more Zorro. I don't have any more Zorro comics. There's... like, unless I go hunting through archive stuff, I don't think I'll be able to find anything for quite a while. Journalism becomes compromised when it becomes a business. Fair. I think just the process of trying to always show two sides is a bit flawed from the beginning when you get to certain extremes. I still think the problem with mutants is the word mutant itself. It dehumanizes them. Also, having a mutant-exclusive school, they should allow normal kids, they grow up understanding mutants, making friends with them, learn how to react when a person becomes a mutant, and stuff like that. I see what you're saying. The Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters is a refuge. It's an asylum. It's a place for the mutants to be safe amongst their own. That would be a step one day, though, I'm sure. We need a new Zorro movie. Yes, we do. That would be great. A good one, or at least one I like. Yeah, that would be ideal. I'll take a Zorro movie. I would prefer a good Zorro movie. I really do want a Zorro movie. I remember Quentin Tarantino talking about when he was helping plot Django Zorro crossover. He ran into Jamie Foxx and told him about it, and Jamie Foxx got really excited. He was like, "Oh man, when we do this, let me call up Antonio and we'll get this going." I'm like, "I'd so be there for that, man. That could be really cool." Have Antonio Banderas reprise the role of Zorro. I could really go for a Zorro Legacy series. I would love that if we just, kind of go on down the timeline, and pass on the mask and sword and all that. But Zorro has to have a sword. I don't care how far out of the 1800s we get. Zorro needs a sword. Anyway, I think that'll do it for comic reviews then. Everyone, thanks very much for watching. Bye.